Hi, everyone. My name is Gopal. I'm a third-year medical student at USF.
Hi, my name is William Wallach. I'm also a third-year medical student at USF.
Today, we're going to be talking to you about a study where we surveyed resiliency and burnout among emergency medicine resident physicians. So, a bit of background before we jump in. As we know, burnout is an extremely prevalent problem in the healthcare industry, but particularly among emergency medicine physicians. We're interested in measuring burnout via administering the mass log burnout inventory for medical personnel, also known as the MBI. We're also interested in a variable called grit. Grit is also known as resiliency and is measured via the short grit scale, which is a two-factor survey that measures resiliency and perseverance in individuals. We are interested in measuring grit as a predictor rather than an outcome. And we know that this measure has been a strong predictor of success within various cohorts. So our purpose and significance is threefold. First, we want to assess the correlation between MBI and GRIT-S. Quantitative measurement of resilience has not yet been correlated with physician burnout. Thus, we want to know, is GRIT-S a truly effective tool to predict burnout? We also want to assess the variation of GRIT-S and MBI with residency year. And finally, we hope that this will inform future studies utilizing MBI and GRIT-S to examine physician performance metrics.
All right, so for our methodology, we used a survey that included both the GRIT-S and the MBI that were administered in person. Our population was 24 emergency medicine residents at TGH. We also looked at some other demographics that we have listed on the slide. Specific for our analysis, we used a t-test and ANOVA, and we also used a linear regression analysis. All right, so our raw data showed that on average, for our first year residents and our third year residents were more burned out than our second year residents. The MBI is a tilting scale, which means that a high score means you're very burned out. Likewise, the GRIT-S for a high score, like let's say 4, means that you're very resilient. So we saw no variation of resilience scores of GRIT-S scores across residencies, but we did see that with the MBI measuring burnout. We found statistically significant differences between first and second years and second and third years, again, with second years being less burned out than the other two cohorts. And we did not find a statistically significant difference in the resilience scores between any of the three cohorts. When we used ANOVA and took averages, again, we found that there was statistically significant differences in burnout scores, but not in resilience scores. Finally, for our linear regression, we found that grit explained 44% of burnout, with our R-square being 0.45, so 45%. We also had an interesting outlier where we had one resident who was extremely burnt out and had a very low resilience scores. And so one thing that we are going to take a look at is when we re-administer the survey in the next month, we're going to keep track of that resident specifically, and we're going to see if that was truly just an outlier or if that specific physician is still as burnt out or maybe even more burnt out.
So for conclusions and future directions, we found 3 major takeaways from this study. One is that there does exist a relationship between resiliency and burnout in this population of EM residents, particularly via our linear regression analysis, which found that 45% of MBI variation is explained by GRIT-S. Second, we found significantly higher levels of burnout among residents in years 1 and 3. We hope that additional studies will inform reasons for this finding. And finally, we found what we expected, which is that resilience as a character trait, as opposed to burnout, which is a snapshot in time, is not correlated with the year of training. And in the future, we would like to repeat the surveys this year and subsequent years to increase our data size. We also additionally want to follow a cohort over time to examine changes in MBI related to baseline grit scores. and eventually examine physician performance metrics and correlate them with resiliency and burnout. Thank you.
Thank you for your time.